connected to the internet, so we're checking to make sure, but it looks like folks are able to watch on video as well. So we appreciate your indulgence for that. We did not want to cut off the residents, and we wanted to make sure to proceed with our meeting today, so thank you for that. Before we do open to the public, Emily Deadweiler is here, the chair of the planning board, and she may not be able to stay for the whole meeting, so I asked her to come and update us on some of the matters that are before the planning board are about to come up. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you. So there's just three things I want to just update all of you and also the public who might be interested. Number one, I just wanted to address dates. This year, we moved our meeting from the third Monday to the third Tuesday, and that was because we wanted to hire a highest possible caliber planner, and I will get to that. That meeting, so for the remainder of 2025, just so everyone knows, in case they missed it, it's the third Tuesday of the month. This month, we are also adding an additional meeting. So we will have a meeting on March 18th and March 25th. The meeting on the 18th, the agenda should be coming out very soon, and the meeting on the 25th, we will actually be hearing 2 applications. So I'll get to that a little bit. I wanted to just mention where we are with professionals. Last year we had a very good engineer, and we actually had at one point very experienced attorney, very experienced planner. As is not unusual, those very experienced planners moved on, and for other reasons, and so we ended up with not as experienced planners. We went out this year, and we have now a really good attorney and a really good planner. Both of them have over 24 years of experience, and I personally can tell you, having them on board already for the last month and a half, it's been longer, right? It's 3 months. Time flies. Has been really helpful. Specifically, the planner. People may know his name. He's Jim Kyle. He actually worked for Banish. Was involved in some of the early zoning changes that were made many years ago. So I just wanted everyone to know what we've done. Speaking of applications, we've had a really busy year last year and this year. Last year we had multiple applications that went over multiple months, which when you have that happen, it's really hard to keep everything moving. So at this point, we now have 3 applications that are ready, that are either ongoing or ready to be heard. One of them we've already heard 1 month, one of them we've already heard 2 months. So both of those applications, the Monahan application and the Jersey Sports applications, will not be heard on March 18th. They will be heard on March 25th. On March 18th, we will be dealing with other matters, a completion hearing, and multiple other matters. So we have more applications. We have a tiny little bit of a backlog, which is why we have these 2 meetings planned. And I pray that we get through these ones. It's really and then I wanted to say is this: thank you all for getting us more members. I know there's one more coming. It really makes a difference, especially when we have these long applications. What happens is someone's absent, then we get to the next month, the new person has to listen, then the last minute the attorneys have said, we don't want to do that because we don't have a full board. That's kind of what's been happening lately. So if you see where last minute reschedules, that's what's been going on. It's not just that, but some of those items. So I just wanted to give you a sense of what's been going on and give members about why these things are moving the way they are, and let you know that we are working to get through that backlog. Any questions?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I just wanted to say, I know you and the planning board have been dealing with many applications, and we appreciate that. It can be a lot, and I appreciate also that you found high-quality professionals. That's really important in a town like the East Amwell, when our land use decisions are so important for keeping the character of our community. Keeping it rural only works if we enforce our rules, and we have smart people to do it. So I appreciate that, and also adding additional days. I know the members are spending extra time with applications, while also considering the proactive things that you are to make sure we're keeping it rural. So it's a lot, and I know from my point of view, I think you're really running the board very professionally, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I didn't even mention we're spending a lot of time on applications, and you're right, there are things that came out of the master plan review, things that we need to look at that we just have not gotten to, and that is personally annoying to me. just trying to, now that we have good professionals on board, I think we spent a lot of time in the last month on the phone, trying to smooth out our processes, figuring out how to get the applicants in front of us faster, things of that nature, and hopefully with that and some of the backlog, we'll be able to get to some of the other things that are in my opinion, equally important to be proactive. So, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Without objection, we'll go to open to the public, matters on the agenda. And know that there are a number of things listed for discussion items. You don't need to speak on those if you want to wait until those particular discussion items come in, whatever that is, agenda item 8, right? So if you want to speak now, you can, but honestly, it's usually better if you came to speak about one of those items to wait and do it right then. We'll allow the public, of course, to speak at that time. So at this time, we're open to the public on agenda items. Anyone? Yes, gentleman first and then in the back.
Yes,
Thanks for coming all the way up. I know it's a little extra, but
that's okay.
if you speak loud, it'll be great.
I can speak louder.
Thank you.
My name is Dariusz Golczewski. I'm a resident of this township. I was here 3 months ago in December, and I brought up an issue to the township committee's attention, and the issue being that this township, for some unexplained reason, is one of the last holdouts in the state of New Jersey and in fact in the entire country. It's probably less than 5 townships left in the entire country that does not allow the residents to obtain a cottage food license. New Jersey State issues those licenses to everyone except those very few, probably less than 5 townships left. And no one was able to defend that position. You, Mr. Mayor, said that you were not aware of this issue and you guys gonna look at this and address it.
If you could be brief, because actually, because it's not on the agenda, you're supposed to wait till the end, but, so let me just interject and say, when you raise the issue, we have notified the planning board and asked them to take a look. Our attorney also pulled out an ordinance from a nearby municipality, because there's some, land use matters that have to be considered. And so we're gonna look for some expertise from our planning board to investigate that and see what they think about it.
Okay, so this is being addressed and it's an ongoing issue.
Yes, exactly. So I recall you coming, and so what we do is we like to send issues oftentimes to our committees that have particular expertise in the area. Since this is a land use issue and have other ramifications, we've asked them to take a look, and we know they've got a lot of applications. You just heard from the chairwoman, but they will be considering that, doing some investigation and reporting back to us. So we will have a chance to consider it. And I did indicate, yes, I had never heard about this before, so we'll need to get some education on what it's about and how it fits with our community.
Right, I would love to be a part of that discussion if
Yeah, of course. We'll when that's ready, we'll have it on the agendas. You can watch the agendas and come back.
when it's ready.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
there is a preliminary discussion on that on the planning board next month.
Okay.
On
So-
the 18th. So
just-
it has come to us for preliminary discussion.
Next month,
This meeting, I'm sorry, March 18th. It's on.
March 15th,
Yeah, look for the agenda to make sure it doesn't change, but that is the plan as of now.
I'll be here.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
The only thing, Dante, is, Linda, the historic preservation ordinance concepts outline, it cuts off mid-sentence. I'm wondering if there's another page that didn't get printed. I'll show you.
If so, we can take a quick adjournment and print up some. Let me look at my original.
Right there, it stops right there. I don't know if it's a two-sided.
Linda
Oh,
was
there's
having
more, yep.
issues before with the
I know.
one-sided,
What's
two-sided.
going
So
I think that's it right there, isn't it? Is that it?
let
The
me
back of it?
let me
Yeah, that
peek
might-
right here. I can see.
You're right.
Yeah, that's
All
it.
right.
There's another
I
side.
can run and go make more copies. We wanna recess?
Sure. Why don't we recess for a couple of minutes, because we'll be getting to that, and that way people can review it. So we'll take a break for just a few. Good?
Good.
Okay, so we'll resume the meeting at this time. Linda was able to make copies for the members of the public. This is for the outline on discussion items for historic preservation. So let's jump back to see if anyone else has any comments from the public, items on the agenda for this evening. Okay, seeing none without objection, we're closed to the public at this time. Approval of minutes, item 7. Linda, I just saw one word
Okay.
on page 3 about the grit yard, where it said, quote, it should say voted to cease taking brush for the moment. It said cease
Oh, I put
instead of
cease, okay.
cease. But,
I do know the difference.
yeah,
All right, I'll change that.
that's fine.
Thank you.
We just need to cease doing that. I don't know if anyone else saw anything, questions? Okay, may I have a motion to approve with that change?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Okay, so now we're at special discussions. First, we're gonna take the historic preservation topic, and that's the outline that Rick was just referencing. So let me just pull that up here. Nick, before we do the grant after, I want to try to do this one first, there's be more discussion for members. Okay, all right, thanks for your patience. So, historic preservation concepts. So, history here was Tam Lee had drafted a proposed amended historic preservation ordinance, and the planning board reviewed it, made some changes, and forwarded it to us for consideration. The proposed amendment raises a number of issues that I think merit discussion for the Township Committee and the public before we introduce something. So what I did was I went through and did an outline trying to categorize some of these to help focus the discussion with members of the public and us on these. The different categories were, category 1 was some possible immediate issues that we could address. Number 2 category is reasonably protecting truly historic structures. And the third is category 3, non-binding suggestions for other structures that the township believes warrant attention. My thought was to take each of these in turn. I included some issues and items. I can reference what those are, and then maybe invite Tam to talk a little bit about it, since she was the main actor pulling this together, which we appreciate. So let's focus on category 1 first, and we can invite the members of the public to ask questions or speak after Tam does, and the Township Committee can join in just as a regular kind of discussion. So some of the issues that might be category 1 for possible immediate addressing. One would be the structure and rules of the Historic Preservation Committee. One was a quorum. Tam and the Planning Board had proposed that the quorum be made 50 plus 1 of the Historic Preservation Committee membership. Her rationale is that the existing ordinance states that 3 members of the committee constitute a quorum, but that makes it difficult for the committee to create subcommittees, ergo the recommendation. The second structural matter is appointment of committee members. Tam and the Planning Board had proposed changing the appointment power to be from the Township Committee to be a mayoral appointment. And Tam's rationale was that the existing ordinance states that the Township Committee shall appoint members, but the amendment would allow the mayor to make the appointment. She could talk about reasons and the like. So you can think about that. Another issue that could be something for possible quick addressing is broadly protecting historic bridges and culverts. The thought is to ensure that the township has the authority to designate bridges and culverts as historic. Policy goal is to ensure that the town has that power. That would give us the ability to protect historic structures. For example, if the county is thinking of changing, knocking down, modifying. And I believe Tam told me, but I'm not sure, so we'll ask her, that the town may already have this authority, and so we can ask about that. And the third issue that I just spotted as a possible immediate action item was the proposal of pausing demolition permits for 60 days to allow photographs to be taken of a historic structure. Tam had described the rationale as that the amendment would only pause the execution of demolition permits for historic structures and would pause them for 60 days so as to allow the committee the time to make arrangements to take photographs of something that might be going away if it's getting destroyed. That would allow it to create a record of a historic structure. It would be with the owner's permission before demolition. So on those items, maybe Tam, if you wouldn't mind explaining a little more, and then I'd invite questions and comments from the public and members of the Township Committee.
First of all, just for the record, I did that first draft in November of 2023. And by January, I had handed it off to a subcommittee who worked on it. They then sent it to the Historic Preservation, who sent it to the Planning Board. So there are a lot of people that worked on this. It hasn't been my draft for a very long time. Okay?
Who was the subcommittee?
Who was in the subcommittee? Will Harrison, John Buckwald,
I didn't know.
and then
John Allen.
John Allen also was in.
Okay, I wasn't
subcommittee.
sure if it was a subcommittee for historic preservation or planning board.
No, it was an ad hoc subcommittee
Got it, okay.
of people who are more familiar with historic preservation issues.
And so we'll in that case, we'll invite Will up next if he wants to speak on these issues. 'Cause my intent in calling you in particular was I knew you were a primary architect, but if anyone else is present for that, we want to get the benefit of their thoughts, so please go ahead.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion that went on.
Thank you.
With respect to the quorum issue, and I was glad to see Andrea here because she might have more background on why the Historic Preservation Ordinance says that the quorum is 3. My understanding is it's because they had trouble getting people for that committee, and so they wanted at least 3 there so they could do business. Problem is, you have a committee now, and the committee has trouble doing subcommittees. So the 50 plus 1, I mean, that's consistent with Robert's Rules of Order for a quorum. It's a majority of the committee. So that's just bringing that into conformance with convention. With respect to appointing members, again, we only have 2 committees in town where the members, according to the ordinance, where the members are appointed by the entire township committee, and that's historic preservation and recycling. All the others, the ordinance says that the members are appointed by the mayor. So since you're changing the ordinance, it's an opportunity to bring this into conformance with the bulk of the other committees. So that's why we did that. That's why that was suggested. With respect to protecting bridges and culverts, absolutely, we have the authority. There is a ton of case law on this. I mean, I couldn't list it all. But the gold standard for historic preservation are the recommendations from the U.S. Department of the Interior. These are recommendations for historic preservation. And they say that historic preservation should be applied to buildings and objects, structures. They don't even say this has to be a whole building. It could be the foundation of a building. It could be a site with nothing else on it, like sites where things happened, where events happened. It could be vegetation. I mean, there is an alley of elm trees on Washington Road in Princeton. That's on the National Historic Registry. So all of these things are eligible for historic. And that's because they all contribute to the historic character. And particularly in East Amwell, we have these 7 districts, but we also have a lot of farmhouses. So the whole town has this historic sort of feel to it. So yes, you should include everything that you can. Historic preservationists, they would tell you should include everything that you can to protect the character. With respect to the demolition permits, here again, this wouldn't deny anyone a demolition permit. It would simply pause it so that we have, the Historic Preservation Committee can have the time it needs to make arrangements to record what's about to be lost, whether it be through photographs or, if the property owner allows them to, maybe they can go through and get floor plans or whatever. It just gives them the time to do that. There are lots of ordinances that require this to be done and put the burden on the property owner. This doesn't do any of that, okay? You only went through the first section. Did you want me to?
Yeah, I think maybe we'll take them in turn, so yeah, so on category one, I think that's fine. Will, did you wanna add anything on those three items? Suggestions, thoughts, anything?
Well, this is in general to the entire ordinance. First of all, let's not forget that even though the Historic Preservation Committee owns the generation of this revision, Tamara is this spark plug that makes it all work, and I think we all owe her tremendous gratitude for her voluntarily working on this. And she's our advisor, just like your attorney. In some ways, your attorney is your advisor, but we rely on Tam. But she's did this voluntarily. I speak in favor of the entire ordinance. Years ago, I came to the Township Committee before you were on and asked that the quorum be revised to comport with what almost every other Robert's Rules committee and commission functions by. 50% plus one of the committee. If you had a committee of 4, for example, we'd need 3 people to be a quorum. That would fluctuate with whoever is authorized to be on it. So that, and most of the other details, I think, you could revise this every month for the next year. Minute detail. I think it's time to go and move on this and approve it. And there are others in the audience who may have an opinion on this. I would simply ask, just to, in the interest of shortening the time, ask all the folks that are supporting this ordinance stand and let you know that they supported it at this time. Do you have any questions of me at this point?
No, that was helpful to me, I appreciate it.
We just like to see this. I started working on this a year ago. It's about a year, and Tam's been working on it before that.
Well, I appreciate your efforts and Tam's efforts also. Yeah, and our intent is to, this is why we kind of categorize things, was to try to, because we had gotten a lot of comments and some questions about it, was to try to start by category with the things that seem most easy to work on, because we know you're trying to get progress and move forward, and we feel that that's important too. So we want to try to see if we can get some consensus on that and go ahead. So maybe we'll then turn now to the public, and you guys may respond to some things that they say as well as we go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes, please, Emily.
A couple things. One is, I want to echo my thanks to Tam. We put her name on it, but I will tell you, I have never had someone who's willing to just work on something, give you guidance, not put a strong opinion on something, like truly very helpful in that way. So I just want to say that. With respect to a couple of the items, I recall very specifically the demo permit was something that I think when the Historic Preservation Committee sent it to us, was it 30 and you moved it to, or we moved it to 60, or was it the other way around?
Dante moved it.
Okay, I knew somebody moved it. Okay.
No, I didn't move. I was saying you have to be careful of how long you're delaying people's permits, so it has to be some kind of fair distance. I don't remember whether, was it 30?
It was
in the draft.
It
Was
was
it
in the
30?
draft as 30
Between the historic preservation
and planning. So I just want to own that one. I don't remember who made the motion, because we had some discussion about wanting to have enough time, not wanting to put undue burden on
Right.
the residents, right? Tim, I wanted to just ask you a question, to Dante's question about, does the Historic Preservation Committee already have the authority on the culverts? And you answered yes, there's plenty of case law. Are you saying that there's case law, but we should still make it very clear in the ordinance? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't think we have the authority to do this because all of these other items, bridges and culverts, that's all within the Department of the Interior's recommendations for how to manage historic preservation. If you're not going to save everything that's historic, you're gonna lose the character. That's what the,
But I guess what I think Emily's asking, and I have the same question, is if you look at the language of our ordinance now, does it specifically reference bridges and culverts?
it does not, no, what it references, you want our current one or the one you're looking, the amended one?
Well, both, actually.
Both,
Do we
okay.
do it currently, and are you proposing something, because I would guess if it's not referenced, what you're saying is we have authority under case law, but we should reference it specifically because it's our ordinance, and that would make sense to me if that's the case.
And that's what I'm trying to get to, like, is there an objection here? Is there a concern? Because you've raised the issue, like, what is the outcome we're looking for?
I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I think protecting our historic bridges and culverts is important. So, so then the procedural question then is, so what do we need
What's
to
the
do
best way to do that?
Is it in there? Is it implied? Does it need to be expressed?
Okay. It's in both, in fact, this is part of the ordinance that didn't change, it's in both in the existing and the proposed. It refers to historic buildings, structures, sites, objects, and districts.
I
So
see.
that's
So,
inclusive.
so I see. So but it's more of a
So a
catch-all
bridge is a structure.
rather than referencing. Okay.
Correct.
So in your opinion then, are you saying that those bridges and culverts should be referenced specifically, or is your
I
opinion?
don't think it's necessary, and
It's not.
again, it's not necessary because we're using the Department of the Interior recommendations for these sorts of ordinances as the support. We're doing everything that's consistent with that, so that anyone who works with this is going to understand that. I mean, you wouldn't expect just anybody to implement your stormwater management ordinances. You're gonna need an engineer to do that. So when we're talking about historic preservation landmark designations, not just anybody's gonna do that. You're gonna have people who understand this stuff.
Well, but maybe I'm not understanding. So, because I know some of the concerns we've heard from residents are, if you use just a generic omnibus, broad definition, are you capturing like chicken coops? Are you catching sheds?
But see, that's
So-
what this is what I was, I'm
if-
sorry.
So let me just finish the question.
Yes.
So my question is, if we're trying to figure out what are the things we want to protect that are historic, that's what I'm asking, because it seems to me that historic bridges and culverts should be protected. And if I'm hearing your answer as we don't need to because a really broad category works, well, does the broad category work, or is that too expansive? Because if that's too expansive, and some residents have concerns, expressed concerns to me about that, then maybe we should reference these and make sure we're not including chicken coops and sheds or something.
Well, if the chicken coop predates 1941, you might want to. I mean, that's
Well,
how
tell-
historic
tell-
preservation.
tell us
isn't
why.
there a process though as well?
Because it's part of the history. There is a process.
And I think that's where I think might be getting lost here. It's not a random chicken coop, there's a process to get designated. You're gonna know, right?
Yes.
There's a process.
There is
There's
a
a
process.
professional that does it, or a volunteer professional, if
There-
you will. There's someone with some
So you're saying
knowledge.
there'd have to be an inventory done of everything, including chicken coops, to see if that structure is
Well, the
historic?
Historic Preservation Committee will decide which, what they want to get historic designation on, okay? I mean, we already have 7 districts, so there are a lot of structures that already have national historic significance.
Right, but
they
isn't,
don't have
but so
local.
here's one question then, so if the ordinance says, look, we've got 7 districts, right, federal districts, and the ordinance proposes, the proposed ordinance would propose that each of those federal districts is made a local district. And then if the definition says that each of those structures of any kind within those districts is protected, I think that's why residents are saying, well, I'm now concerned that you're over-regulating everything.
No,
So
no, no.
can you speak to that?
No, not every structure in the historic district is a landmark structure, okay?
Because there would need to be an inventory of every structure to determine which structure has historical importance.
Yeah, okay, let me explain it this way. Both the existing ordinance and the proposed ordinance have a section in there on how to designate historic structures as landmark structures, okay? To the best of my knowledge, it's never been done in East Amwell. Nobody has ever exercised that part of the ordinance. Kenna and I are working on a bridge project that you guys know about. we're doing the research to sort of justify why some of these bridges should have landmark status. Same thing could be done for buildings, or anything historic. And again, you want to keep all these historic things, if they're old and they're part of the history, then you want to save that, because then you're protecting the historic character. Not all structures, not everything within a historic district will have landmark structure, or landmark designation. Not everything's going to be built before 1941. But the other buildings, you want them to at least complement, or at least take into consideration the historic character of the district. So, and I've said this before, you don't want people necessarily to build a geodesic dome in the middle of Ringgoes. It'll just adversely affect that whole historic character, which at least the HPC and the planning board think are important. So the guidelines here will come into play if people have non-historic buildings or sites and they need some sort of approval for it. But nothing's being mandated here. It's just going to be a consideration in the permits that they get.
So two questions then, so for folks to understand, so explain how the ordinance would propose to do this inventory of determining which structures has significance. Is it like you and the other person would go out and do it, and then you'd propose it to the Historic Preservation Committee and the Planning Board, and then they would propose to the Township Committee?
What the ordinance says,
Today.
it says it today, and it will say it. That hasn't changed. This landmark designation process has not changed. It says that the Historic Preservation Committee does an analysis, okay? They will probably get someone to do that analysis. Now, I understand we have, you're appointing 2 people to the Class A tonight, so that's great. You need a Class A type person, someone with historic preservation background, to do the initial analysis. That creates a report. That goes to the Historic Preservation Committee. The committee then reviews the report and decides whether or not the elements within that report should be nominated for landmark designation. They then send their recommendation to the Planning Board. The ordinance says that the Planning Board then decides whether or not to accept those recommendations. If they accept them, the designation is created right there at the Planning Board. Once it's created, the Planning Board sends their decision to the Township Committee, and you all would have a choice. You can do nothing, in which case the Planning Board's designation stands. You could amend it, in which case it would be redesignated based on your amendment. Or you could kill it and say, nope, we don't want any of those sites or buildings designated, okay? But that's how our current ordinance reads. So that's how things get landmark designation.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that explanation. All right, so that lays it out for folks. So members of the public, questions, comments? Francis first, and then Rick.
Regarding the landmark designation, would it have to be part of one of the districts that you make to qualify? Because there's houses like the Chamberlain house over there on Rainbow Hill Road. There's a very old house on Losey Road. There are a lot of different places that go back a whole long way.
Right.
You know.
The local historic district, according to the proposed ordinance, is slightly different than the National Historic District. The National Historic District, like I said, there's 7 of them. The local historic district would include all 7 of the national districts, plus any site that has a structure that predates 1941, because it was brought up through these various versions of the ordinance, that we have structures outside. We have a lot of farmhouses and whatnot outside of the districts. So this ordinance would capture those.
Okay, and back when Alona and her group were doing the national, they identified 6 or 7 hamlets that was just too much work to take on at the time to try to include. But there are little small pockets of housing and buildings, like right where I am, that was Minktown and different other ones, that's something that you might want to consider somewhere down the line for.
Yeah, there is an inventory of historic sites and structures. It has 92, and it was done by the Bicentennial Committee in the late 70s. It has 92 different sites on it, plus a list of 24 more sites that should be investigated. So, I mean, the HPC has a place to start if they want to do this. And I should have mentioned, with respect to the landmark designation process, once a place is, when a place is being considered for landmark designation, the property owner is made aware of that. And when the designation is created, they also have the ability to appeal it, and they would appeal it here to the Township Committee. That's all in the ordinance. And again, it's the existing and the proposed ordinance. It's the same.
Thank you.
I have a technical question. You said that the township's inaction would actually confirm the designation. That's what you said.
Well, it wouldn't
The
reverse.
township would have to act to actually dismiss the designation, right?
Correct.
What if the township is too busy to act for a while? Does that automatically becomes designation confirmed?
No, there's no timeline mentioned at all. So whenever they, yeah,
I see.
assume whenever they are.
Good. Thank you. I think, Rick, you were next.
Can I ask a question before you start? Since Rick's here and Andrea, I am curious, do either one of you know why it was only 3 members for HPC, the quorum?
I don't remember anything about it. I've been off the township committee for 20 years
I-
and I just don't remember.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's very old. It's a very old part of the ordinance.
Yeah, I was
It
just
predates,
curious.
yeah.
We had this issue for other committees, and I think we fixed it on 1 or 2 of them along the lines of what Tam is recommending.
Okay.
Because the problem is, it's fine to have a standard definition of quorum when you're able to fully staff a committee. We're not able to fully staff committees, particularly the ancillary committees. As a result, some meetings, they just don't have enough people because one person is out and now all of a sudden you have a problem. So I think it's a great idea to change the definition. We started to do it with other committees and there's no reason not to do it here. And mayor versus township committee, I'm agnostic on that. Typically, the mayor's gonna consult with the other township committee members anyway. So to me, that's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I'm gonna start with dividing the world into 2 buckets. One is your bridges and culverts, and the other bucket is everything else. I think we should absolutely do the most that we possibly can to protect our historic bridges and culverts, period. The notion that the county would come in and take out a 1-lane bridge or a 1-lane culvert and put in this concrete monstrosity, setting aside the loss of that historic structure, those 1-lane bridges calm traffic, they slow down speeding. You put in a concrete monstrosity, you now have speeding issues. So I would do the absolute most that this township committee can do to protect the historic bridges and culverts. I don't know anything about the state law on that, but even if the state law gives you very broad authority, I would have a bridges and culverts ordinance, even if it's just conceptual. Because the problem is, you all now know what Tam told you. 5 or 10 years from now, when you're not sitting here and somebody else is sitting here, they're not going to know that. And Tam may not be here to tell them that. And they may just go to look in the ordinances and see nothing. So there should be something to at least alert them that they have this broad authority. What that something is, again, it could be conceptual. It doesn't have to be 5 pages. it could be a few concepts, but something to alert future generations on this committee that there are rules out there. My impression is that the vast majority of the residents in East Elmo would support that. I mean, just from my time on the Township Committee, the residents like our little bridges and culverts. It adds to the charm of the township. So I don't think you're going to get pushback, and you're not really interfering with anyone's plans. You may get a few people who come in and say, no, I want the concrete monstrosity. I need to bring my heavy equipment over that bridge. I have to now go around it. You're never going to make everybody happy. So that's bucket number one. Bucket number two is everything else. And I sat down and went through the draft of the ordinance. I annotated it. I sent my annotation to Dante with my comments. I'm not going to go through all of that tonight because I had a lot of comments. I'm just going to discuss a few concepts. Things that I learned while I was on the Township Committee. And I also practice real estate as a lawyer, so I see these things in my practice. Surprises are bad. People don't like surprises. Ambiguities are bad. Not always, but generally they're bad. Ambiguities leave people wondering what they can and cannot do. Then they have to come in and get interpretations. Interpretations, quite often by their nature, are subjective and can vary depending on who happens to be sitting at this dais. It also imposes additional work. So if you enact an ordinance that is ambiguous, you're going to be creating more work for our already overworked planning board and for the Township Committee. So whatever you decide to do on the everything else bucket, the rules should be clear so that people can look at the rules and understand them as clear as you could make them. Also, in terms of people not liking surprises, if we're going to go down the road of putting in place restrictions on what you can and cannot do in an historic structure, in some fashion we're going to have to get that message out to the residents. And ideally in some fashion, when a house changes hands, it would be nice if there were something, maybe even an ordinance, that necessitated that you put the buyer on alert. For example, we have an ordinance that requires you, when you change hands on a property, you're supposed to inform the buyer of our right to farm in East Amwell. How often it's actually done, I'm not sure. I don't know how often it's actually enforced. But you need to put people on alert. Particularly if you're going to draft an ordinance that picks up structures before 1941. If I buy a house that was built in the 1700s, I probably should suspect there may be some protections for that house. I buy a house that was built in 1940, I don't think I'm anticipating that my house is subject to restrictions. So if you draw the line at 1800, okay, that's one thing. If you draw the line at 1941, you're more likely to surprise people than at 1800. If I bought a house here in the past, not designated historic, and I had plans to do things with that house, and all of a sudden you now designate it historic and I can't do what I wanted to do, I'm going to be cranky. So you ought to keep that in mind. If you're going to significantly slow down what I want to do, you ought to keep that in mind. And that's tied to the surprises. If somebody goes out and hires a hires an architect, has plans drawn up, hires a contractor. The contractor is now ready to start the job, goes to pull the permits and is told, whoa, wait a minute. This house was designated historic, and by the way, you have to go through this process to do this. You're going to have some angry people coming in. And you may say, well, that is what it is, and I'm okay with that, and that's fine as long as you understand you're going to have angry people. Because now their job is on hold for what could be months or longer, which means the contractor's going on to the next job. Probably whatever price you were quoted is no longer guaranteed, particularly in this world today, where today you have tariffs on lumber, tomorrow you don't. You can't. So, I mean, who knows? The other general point I'll make is saying something is a consideration in determining whether to grant a permit, to me, is a recipe for disaster. When you go to West Amwell to get a construction permit, is the West Amwell construction officer now supposed to be making the decision? In other words, to the extent anything is supposed to be a consideration in deciding whether you could get the permit or not, there better be awfully clear guidelines for the construction officer. Let me give you a couple of comments on section 1, since that's where you really started. We digressed from that. And pausing demolition for 60 days to allow for photographs of historic structures. In part, I guess it depends on how you define historic structures. If it's defined really broadly, a 60-day pause may be a problem. If it's defined narrowly, it may not be a problem. So you may want to think about the 60 days, but I think that has to be thought about in the context of what is an historic structure. Second, when you say to make arrangements to photograph or otherwise make a record with the owner's permission, if I don't want to wait 60 days, do I just tell you no? You can't come on my property and take pictures. Does that mean now I don't have to wait the 60 days? And if the answer is yes, then the 60 days may be meaningless. This whole thing may be meaningless, because once people figure out that the 60 days drops off if they tell you no, they'll just tell you no if they're anxious to get their structure demoed. I would think about that, but it really needs to be considered in the context of how broadly you define historic structures. That's all I have for now. Maybe all I have for the whole night. I'll see what else is said. But I think the general concepts are what are important, the message I wanted to communicate. I don't have a horse in this race. I don't have historic structures on my property. The township could decide it wants to freeze East Amwell in time and not allow residents to do anything with their properties. The other end of the spectrum is the township could decide you want to let residents do whatever they want with their properties. If you start imposing restrictions on what people can do with their properties, you run the risk of people being really cranky. So you should try to limit this to things that are really historic, things we really care about. Oh, and I'll add one more thing. People talk about the historic character of the village and not wanting to disrupt the historic character of the village. The village is an eclectic mix of architecture. There's no one type of architecture. There's no one period where all those houses were built. It's not like the townhouses in Manhattan where you have this group that were all built, within a relatively same period of time, 150 years ago. There's an eclectic mix of architecture. Region 9, I think, personally, their proposed design fits very nicely within the village. I know there are people here who disagree with that, who think it doesn't. But look at the architecture. Walk the village. It's very eclectic. I don't know how I feel about a dome in the village. We do have a dome house on Wagner Road. I don't know how I feel about one in the village. But it's not like it would disrupt this sort of homogeneous landscape in the village. So, I mean, again, where do you want to draw the line? Thank you.
Can I-
Sure,
on
absolutely.
some of that stuff? Picking up where Rick left off. If we don't respect the historic character that's left in our 7 historic districts, it will be diluted even more than it has been. So that's the main reason for these guidelines, okay?
Tim, can I ask you a question before you go on?
Yeah.
It will interrupt. So, is there a reason why, to the extent that the existing ordinance has allowed an inventory and a designation of landmark status to be done, why that hasn't happened in however long?
It's a big job. It requires some specialty, it requires a lot of time.
So if we do enact some changes to the ordinance, do we think that there's the ability and desire for that to happen now from the historic preservation or from?
Well, here's my hope. If we put this ordinance in place, you have an ordinance that not only mirrors the National Historic Registry, but is also consistent with the Department of the Interior recommendations for how to manage historic preservation, that we'll get grants. And we will get a grant to hire someone to do the inventory for us. I mean, or you can get grants to help homeowners with older homes restore their homes in a historic way. I mean, hopefully this will open up access to money.
And what do you see in the proposed ordinance that would open up grant opportunities?
The fact that we would have, number one, we would have a historic ordinance, and we would have local historic districts. Right now, anybody who looks at historic preservation policy here in town, if they know historic preservation, they're saying, you've got national historic districts, but you didn't follow through. You didn't create local ones, you don't have guidelines, you're not doing anything. Since I got your notes, I decided I wanted to have somebody else who knows this stuff review the ordinance. So I contacted a few people. The first was Andrea Tingy from SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office. Sent her the ordinance, asked her to review it and give me her comments. I also sent the ordinance to Deborah Kelly. Now, Deborah Kelly is now a retired historic preservation consultant, but as a retired historic preservation consultant, she is on the Hunterdon County Cultural and Heritage Commission, which is essentially the county version of the Historic Preservation Committee. And I also sent it to Carla Cielo, who is a practicing historic preservation consultant in this area. She actually has a Ringo's address, but she lives in Raritan. And just recently, she finished doing an inventory of all the bridges in Delaware Township and classifying them as either landmark or not. All 3 of these people know historic preservation. They all looked at this ordinance and said the same thing. First of all, what's taking so long? Second of all, there's no teeth to it. Can't you make it stronger? And I said, not in this town. This town doesn't like to overregulate people. I said, this is the best we can do. And they said, well, if that's the best you can do, it is better than what you've got, but it's not as good as it could be. It's a first step. And then the other thing is, they all said it is absolutely consistent with the Secretary of the Interior's recommendations for how to manage historic preservation. The ordinance and especially the guidelines, they're all consistent. The more this is consistent with what the feds do, the better chance we have of getting grant money.
What's the source of law that the federal government uses for those standards? Is it?
I'm not sure what their law is. I mean,
Yeah. Because obviously they don't have ordinances. Do they have statute? Do they have
Guidelines.
yeah.
guidelines?
But I mean, they're much more strict than anything we would use.
And what is the teeth that the folks you consulted with? What is the teeth that they would recommend?
Well, first of all, they'd like us to have a commission, not a committee. Historic Preservation Commission, not a committee. I don't think we'd do that.
Because
Because commissions have authority. They're not advisory.
authority to do what? That's what I'm trying to get, what's the teeth of it? Would they, like, is their recommendation, to, like, designate structures? I mean, because that's what you're recommending anyway, and then impose mandatory
Oh, yeah,
requirements
there
for
are
those?
historic preservation, almost every historic preservation ordinance has more teeth than this does. I mean, you
For
could have,
example?
instead of guidelines, you could have standards.
Standards
you could-
such as, I mean, if. so-
You could turn these guidelines into standards and say, this is what you have to do. This is how you have to trim out your windows or build your porches. And then any project, in addition to going to the planning board, it would have to go and get approved by the Historic Preservation Commission if we had one. I don't think we want to put applicants through yet another step.
And like for trimming out windows, so how would those folks recommend that happen in like a somewhat eclectic village like Ringo's? Like, how would they set meaningful, clear standards for determining trimming out when there are different styles, for example?
The most strict historic preservation ordinances require this of any building in a historic district. And the objective is to bring the less historic looking buildings into, make them look more historic, so that the district
So it would be to
has,
pick
but
one
we're not doing
particular.
any of that.
But I'm just trying to understand what the teeth are that those folks would recommend. So they would pick out Victorian or some type of style and then try to make the others look like that?
Or, no,
colonial?
they respect the style of the.
Well, but that was my
You either
point.
respect the style of the original building, or you respect the style usually of the buildings nearest to it.
But even Dante, working with the committee, we were very careful in like talking about, it's public facing. Like you could be much stronger. You can have regulations that say the whole house, everything inside of the house. All we were doing with, coming up with these ordinances was, guidelines, but, that's why they kind of backed off and said, if we have your permission to come in to photograph so we can document, but we're not telling you what you can, some towns, anything you touch inside your house, even though it's your house, it has to follow all of these rules. With these, we were really trying to not be over restrictive and, make suggestions, guidelines, not telling people what color they're allowed to, there's 3 colors you're allowed to paint your house. We're not doing any of that kind of stuff.
I'm just trying to understand it. So if somebody, let's say I live in the village, I have a Victorian type house, I need some permit. So what might I be asked to do? Forget photographs and stuff, like as part of my permit. If next door to me is a colonial, like, would they recommend that I keep it Victorian? Does it try to preserve each house in the way that it appears?
No.
It was guidelines
The-
to help the homeowner make decisions. If you're interested in keeping the historic character, here are ideas for you. Here's things you can do, but if they say no,
Yeah, there's nothing in there
we
that
can't
you would
stop
force
it.
them, that you would force them to do it.
Yeah, I recall
There's
the
nothing.
non-mandatory part. Okay, I
Right.
appreciate that. I appreciate the explanation.
And if somebody goes for a permit, if the construction code official or the zoning officer can't interpret these guidelines, they have the ability to contact the Historic Preservation Committee, ask either of the Class A members to go over the plans with them and give them some guidance. The construction code officials and the zoning officer nominally work for you guys. So when the ordinance says they should consider the architecture, you tell them what that means. You might tell them, well, as long as they're not doing something super modern and putting in, just huge windows, then let them do it. Or if you tell them, make sure that the zoning official and the construction office talk with the Class A members of the Historic Preservation Committee, then they'll do that. But the ordinance is flexible enough because not every township committee might, want to handle it the same way.
So like in my example where I have a Victorian in town and I wanna put in a hot tub, so is it that they might recommend that I don't do that because that's not historic, or is it?
That's
If you're
probably not
putting it on
gonna
the
be on your
front
front
porch, maybe,
lawn.
but.
Next to the
It's public
So
facing.
you say, so
So if you put that in your backyard,
You can do what you
Go
want.
ahead.
This only
you're
affects,
just talking about the front,
this only affects.
so this is all about
exterior.
just the, so if
It's
it's like a
public
timber frame
facing.
home, right?
Yeah.
That I have.
Yeah.
We're not concerned about whether I get rid of that and put in brick as long as the outside still is.
This is just the outside, any part that can be seen from the right-of-way or public, the public realm. So you might have a house that's on the edge of a park or something, or, and so if people are in the park, they can see the side of the house. Then that facade would have to be historic. Yeah,
So anything that's can be seen from the road.
any, from public space.
It doesn't have to be
Public space.
historic.
Yeah, yeah, and it has to be
Like
an
to
historic
be-
site to begin with. It's not every house, okay?
Yes,
Um,
well,
Ordinances can't cover everything, okay? And some people may suggest that parts of this are ambiguous, but I think people who don't understand stormwater, to go back to that example, they wouldn't understand it either. If this ordinance helps us get grants, one of the things we can do is get a grant to write a handbook that would help explain things, which is what Hopewell Township did, and they've got one of the best handbooks I've ever seen. So that's
We should get a
something we
copy
can
of
do.
that to start with.
Well, exactly, I mean, we can do that, but
Cause I'd be
we've
curious
gotta
to
take
see
this first
because,
step.
I mean, from the lawyer's side of me, when I think about what's described, I just try to figure out, well, what does it require? What does it suggest? What does it mean to the process? How will it be interpreted? I mean, and there's so much, and so that's why I'm just trying to understand how it would work out in practice.
This is phenomenally benign, and again, got 3 specialists that looked at this, and they didn't confer with each other. They spoke with me individually, and they all said exactly the same thing. This is really benign,
Okay.
but it hopefully will get us grant money.
Thank you. Well, yeah.
I certainly cannot eclipse Ann here, and I'm not gonna try. Here comes the pragmatist, folks. And I've been on the committee for 10 years or more. And we've had people come to us and ask for advice. We've never mandated, you cannot do this or you must do that. We are advisory. I want to emphasize this. No matter what you decide, it's advisory. No one is going to be forced to not put a cupola on their house. Well, you have height, you have other restrictions, but not related to historic. So it's all advisory, guidelines, and this is how we function. We've had people come to us. The folks that owned the Landis house came to us, said, we want to point the stones. What we know we're not supposed to use modern mortar. So we tried to find them a company that sold appropriate mortar for 200 or 250-year-old. That's the pragmatic approach. And when I started on the subcommittee, we agreed right at the beginning. We know East Amwell Township doesn't want anything shoved down their throat. They want it to be guidelines, and that's what we do. If they want to put a hot tub in front of a historic house, if they comport with zoning guidelines, we might say, we don't like it. Could you put it somewhere else, please? But that's the extent of this, what this ordinance does, and that's the ordinance under which we're functioning right now and in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, Rick?
I've been taking notes, so they're kind of in the order of how things came up. Later this year, I will be celebrating my 50th anniversary of being a long-distance runner. If the Township Committee decided that it wanted an ordinance pertaining to rules governing runners on our roads, and you put me on that committee, I'm sure I could be helpful, but could I really be totally objective, having been a runner for 50 years? Clearly, my view on things is going to be subjective, tilted towards pro-runners. The fact that 3 people who have devoted their lives to historic preservation are on board with this ordinance, it's nice to know that, but they're not objective. They're laser focused on historic preservation. They're going to push for an even stronger ordinance, and maybe that's fine, and maybe that's what we want, but just bear in mind, they're not objective. You're getting a subjective view. The notion of a commission rather than a committee, that scares me. To convert our historic preservation committee into an historic commission scares me for a number of reasons. One, it's hard to staff these committees. Two, my view is in a small town, significant decisions should be made by elected officials. Officials who were voted into office, who have direct accountability to the residents who voted them into office, and not by a group who are appointed to a committee who are not voted into office and who are getting on that committee because they are in favor of historic preservation. They are not going to be objective. There should be a gatekeeper on significant decisions, and that gatekeeper should be elected officials. It works that way with the planning board. Planning board doesn't have the ability to pass ordinances. They can propose them, but it has to come to this committee. The construction official having to consult with the Historic Preservation Committee before granting a permit, I'm sure the construction official is going to love that. And two, consult about what? If we're saying that these rules are not mandatory, then as long as whatever I want to do complies with, whether it's a zoning permit or a construction permit, the relevant rules, I should get my permit. And that's why there seems to be an inconsistency here saying the construction official should consult with HPC, but these rules are just, in terms of deciding whether to grant a permit, but yet these rules are discretionary. Also, even if you say that the construction official should just have to consult to get the opinion of the Historic Preservation Committee, you're now holding up someone's construction project, perhaps for weeks or months. So if you're going to go down that road, then there should be a process where the construction official should be able to get the opinion of whomever within 48 hours. This notion of we're going to have the rules govern to the extent that the building, the other structure can be seen from a public right of way. That came up in the context of solar. That's an awfully hard rule to enforce. What does it mean to be seen from a public way? I mean, I look at my own road, Rynierson Road. It starts high and it actually goes down very low. Depending on where you are on that road, your vision is, but if you're at the top of that road, you can see the entirety of people's properties who are further down. And if I plant a row of green giants in front of my house to block the view of the public, can I do whatever I want with my historic structure? Can you see that from the public way? And suppose I leave a gap for a walkway, and if you stand in that gap and you look, you can see it. Do the rules apply to the front of my house? But if I put a green giant in that walkway, they don't? It's a hard thing to enforce. I'm not sure that I would use that as the standard of what you could see from a public way. And does it mean what I could see with my eyes, or if I have binoculars, from a public way? I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, all right, we still have a couple, so let's take a couple more, and then, I think, I found this a helpful discussion. Francis, think was next?
Yeah, I'll be really quick and brief. I've been on the Historic Preservation Committee for like 20 years, maybe 25. I remember when it got bigger, I remember when it got smaller. I'm saying let's just be pragmatic. There's been a lot of shopping of this ordinance. What they've got is better. You might want to tune it. You might want to make it 30 days versus 60. There's no teeth in them, because the one thing that in the whole 30 years I've been here was a caveat is historic preservation has no teeth, it has no power, it cannot dictate. It's not like an HOA. If you want an illustration of what the difference between a commission and a committee is, look at this old house. When you see those plumbers up there in New England and they're down there doing all this stuff costing tens of thousands of dollars to the homeowner, that all might be very nice in Boston or Boston, but it's not relevant to East Amwell. Consistent with the architecture or the time period or whatever of the structure versus the area, there's flexibility with that. An advantage for doing something and doing it now is, and Al, you were at the same meeting I was with Marcia, is the county just is kicking out $100,000 in grant money that we can go out and get to try to do some things that would be practical, like inventorying some of these kinds of things. There's not going to be 123 landmark structures in this township. I don't think there's any harm in the way that they've got it, but you can tinker with it till the cows come home or they decide we don't need anything down in Washington. But just put this puppy to sleep and go out there and get the county's money. And, you were there, Al, as was John Allen on all of that stuff. There's a thing called overthinking. And, and I can think of a whole lot of things that need a little bit more thought than this ordinance does. I appreciate the time you've put in, Dante, and certainly Beverly and all that other stuff, but let's just do it. They couldn't get people on the committee, which is why we weren't having meetings. That's why it went down to 3, so that they could have a meeting. And now that you've got more people, and so to have subcommittees where you're actually going to be doing some work and other things, there's been an ebb and a flow since the last millennium. So I don't think there's anything ticking. If you impose stuff on people, they're going to get cranky. But the one thing I've noticed here in East Ammo, no matter what you do, people are cranky. So I'm going to retire to my...
I think I saw 4 others. Will, were you next? You raised your hand, someone over there, I did. I was going to go across. I think you were last, but yes, please.
I'm Kenna Larson. Hello. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I did take notes as well. I wanted to clarify, I guess, some things for you, and then just have the rest go out there. When you were asking about, well, if I have a Victorian, but the neighbor has a colonial, does everything have to look kind of Victorian? No, it's always a house-by-house basis. So if you have a house from 1887, which might look very, say, Queen Anne, next to a house from 1927, which might be the end of arts and crafts, no, you can't try to blend those. That's not even the point. You want them to be distinct, and you want them to be themselves. So that's what makes a historic district, that you have that old character from different eras as an overall, wow, this town is cute and charming.
So let me ask you a question on that. So would it be helpful if, kind of like what Will was saying, if, we had a couple of packages for different, styles, and so if it's an arts and craft, there's a packet that's available to folks who are doing work so that they would know what distinctive, styles are, so that they could get that information without a whole lot of process, or does that not make sense?
Sounds like a lot of work, because we would have to go around inventorying every type of style we have.
What
in
if
the
you
area.
started with like the six most common styles? Because otherwise, wouldn't you have to do that anyway? Because no matter who would come, to HPC, you'd have to investigate theirs, right? So
Sure.
you'd have to do it anyway. I'm trying to think of like what's an easy, what's the easiest way? I think Francis was saying the same thing, to make information available so someone says, oh, it's a Queen Anne. It really looks like this, has these aspects. I should try to protect those. I mean, isn't that stuff that's available?
It
or-
can be hard because there are dilutions. You have high style, which is what we think of, these very fancy houses of different styles, but in an area like East Amwell, when it was mostly agricultural, people didn't have the money or the time to invest in decorative elements, so they're keeping it very simple. You get what's called, rural style, or, I've forgotten the word actually, but it's dumbed down, if you will. What's that?
Farmhouse.
No, there's a
Just not a
preservation
pure
plan.
thing, yeah. I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, so, it's tough to then categorize it, because people will say, oh, no, it's farmhouse style. Well, that doesn't really exist in terms of preservation.
You wanna get the East Amwell style. But the other thing you can do in a handbook, if we get the grant, we can
Yeah.
hire someone to create the
Yeah.
handbook.
Right.
Or copy.
Okay, so that was
Thank you
that.
for letting me interrupt you.
No, that's fine. And the trick about this is that, with Ringo's particularly, you drive down the main drag and there's really nothing that's been built since maybe the 40s. And that's why this becomes an issue, because that's old. And that speaks old to anybody who drives through. But if you stick a totally cold, square, modern box, demo a house, stick that in, it's jarring. And there are reasons why other towns and places don't do this, because it's just jarring. The more on the outskirts, perhaps it makes sense, but inside, yeah, you're gonna lose that character, you're losing that history. I can see that it's a part of the evolution of a town, but because you're taking that leap from the 40s to the 2020s, there's something that's just not meshing there. It's too big a leap, and because we're stuck. We're kind of stuck in time, but in a way that's good. People like that. Some people like that. But it's nice to see that when you drive through a cluster. Go put your modern on the outside. All right, let's move on. When we're talking about the faces of house that you might see from approaching whichever direction, and that you're going to put restrictions on it, we won't probably even get that far because we are not a commission. But it's usually limited to buildings that are in historic districts, not sparsely dotted farmhouses and country homes and things like that. Those might have the recommendation, hey, yes, use the right mortar on your farmhouse, but not, hey, because a driver can see 3 sides of your home from this road, and this road, that you must adhere to these standards. It doesn't affect homes that are out on the outside. It's usually, again, in a cluster in a historic district. So that's why it's keeping that character of that little area. Just to kind of reinforce something, these are not restrictions. So I have not been to this meeting before, ever. I've been to no other meeting except historic preservation. Never done it. And all I've heard is people are concerned that you're telling me what to do or what not to do with my home. I have all these rules coming down on me, and it's like, no, we have no rules telling you anything. We have no restrictions on what you can do to your house. The hope is that you will ask us, is this okay? Do you think that it's gonna be all right if I put this huge addition with an elevator in it for my sickly mother on the front of the old house on John Ringo Road? Maybe we want you to put it on the back. So we're not giving you restrictions, but it is guidance. It's just we're hoping that people will seek guidance. Give me an idea. Some people do want to know, and I have this from personal experience. When I went to school in Ohio and I attended preservation meetings in West Virginia, Wheeling, West Virginia, extremely historic, beautiful city, run down, but beautiful. People want to know what they can do to make it work, and what can I do to make this look historic instead of a door out of Home Depot? Is there anything I can do? What would you advise me to do? And those people care. Some people care, and I think the option to consult is nice. Again, we have no way of forcing anybody to get our opinion, but we should make everyone feel welcome, that they can come here and ask us, because we have professionals who can tell them. The 60-day thing for photos, drawings even. If you know about HABS, which was the one of those alphabet agencies in the 30s that was meant to keep engineers and architects and artists employed during the Depression, they went around and drew beautiful architectural drawings of houses that we were losing. They were trying to capture America's history. And they did it again in the 1960s. So there are these sets of drawings, you can access them online, I think through the Library of Congress somewhere. And it's good to have that option, even on a little scale in East Amwell, that we have somebody who could go out there and just get the pictures before you tear down that barn. Because they're fading, we're losing them quickly. But they're part of our local history. Somebody built this, it's old. Somebody used this, it's part of our farming history. So I think it's a good idea that we do document that stuff before it gets thrown away. And we have people who can do it, and if the 60 days seems too long, maybe we do make it 30. As long as it's, from everybody knowing this, then 30 days, so that we have that chance.
Can I ask a question about?
yeah.
So what's to stop you guys from just doing it now?
Well, because you're asking volunteers to just have the time to go do this.
Yeah.
But, I'm trying to run my own business right now, started. And it's so difficult between everything I need to do to take care of my paperwork, my clients, and then put my time in to go around town and just document everything. Whatever the agenda is, barns today, sheds next week, pump houses the week after. There's not enough time.
But you think if there's that 60-day deadline, you guys would make the time to do it?
Yeah, because it's not going to be every structure, it's going to be one. One person's going to say, I'm ripping down my barn. Oh God. And then you kind of have the drop everything, like, oh God, we've got to go make sure that this doesn't have like special marks on the timbers inside, let's capture that. There are things to look for, and you get excited about it. I get excited about it, so yeah, before you lose it, make sure you know it, because they're rare. Does that answer?
Yeah, that was good, thank you.
Okay. Not meaningless, that was said, that some of this is meaningless, but again, yeah, you can see it's a bias. I'm biased. I love history, I love historic things, I love old stuff. It's a bias. But does that make it not valid? Because somebody else is the complete opposite of me? So you have to have some in between, you have to have some meeting with the minds. Historic structures, is 1941 too soon? I can understand how, so you said 1800 makes sense, but 1940? Well, they're old. And they have a style. And they might have been built especially for, people coming from the war, 1940s. So, I don't think it's too early, because the rule is anything 50 years or older. 1975 is now the year that the federal government says, this house is eligible for the National Register. 75. Maybe some people here were born before then, so you kind of can feel the years. And, does the house I grew up in look like an historic structure that should be saved? Well, no. But if all the others get knocked down in 50 years and mine's the last one standing, I think it's historic, because it's a 1970s colonial with this, that, and that feature that doesn't exist anymore. So we kind of have to be careful, like, what do we cut off? Because if we let them all go, that example doesn't exist anymore. And it's just a portion of history. Why don't we cut out Washington crossing the Delaware? Well, it was just one event. Who cares? There are other huge events in the war. But you preserve these things that made sense. So you always have to pick along the way. And then and this is it, the last thing is we are not looking to be a commission, because they do have power. And I'm currently working on a house in a town that has a commission, and they are strict. They were concerned, you were going to take a window out on the front? Yes, I'm removing it temporarily to fix a wooden member. You're not ripping it out and replacing it with something else. No, well, you still need to come and talk to us, we might wanna issue a permit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so, just to fix a rail on a window. So, we're not a commission, we are so easygoing, we really are just looking to guide people. We need to do a better job letting people know that we're here, so that they can come to us. But, we're just here to say, hey, we know things, this is what we would recommend, it would be nice to see, but at the end of the day, you're gonna do what you want, so. That's it.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your work on identifying bridges and culverts. I think Emily was the next, did I say anyone else? Yeah, Emily?
Just a couple things I kind of wanted to address. John, I think you asked people to stand up if they support this, I do. And I also want to know for the record that I do not have a long time, a lot of expertise or bias pro historic buildings or areas. A lot of us moved, we moved to this area because we're attracted by different things. Some people are here because they really want the open space and they protect that with all their heart and all their mind. Some people came here because they like the historic nature. Some people want both. And I think that's part of what we wrestle with here. I would say that I kind of reject the notion that just because you're an expert, you're not objective. And I would want to say that the people who've chosen to be that we're relying on, I thank them for their expertise. I thank them for their interest. It's like saying because you're an expert in kind of law you
Struggling to
practice.
find something.
What kind of practice? No, I was going to ask you what kind of law you practice. So just because you're an expert in environmental law, you're not objective? Like, I can't, I don't go there. I say, you choose an expert, these are experts, they're volunteering their time, they're no less objective in terms of what is best for this community than the rest of us. So I really wanted to say that. I support it both as a personally living here, and then I also as a member of the planning board, because we do have things come in front of us, and I would like to be able to say, especially when it's a variance, especially when we do have quite a bit of latitude, I would like to be able to rely on the Historic Preservation Committee to help us on those things, because we do have latitude, and maybe there's an opportunity to make something better at that time. So those are kind of my primary comments. Rick said you can't make everybody happy, right? So there's some people who are really going to want make it easy to develop here. They're not going to be happy. There's going to want people that make it easy to knock down a house and put something else here. They're not going to be happy. And you're going to want some people who want really strict rules on preservation, and they're not going to be happy. And I think, to me, based on my limited experience, because I am not an expert, this is a very good first step. You asked why hasn't it been done to this date. This is why. Because this very simple.
Careful consideration?
This very, very, very careful, very many years of consideration.
Well, I don't think we need a year, but I found this discussion very helpful because I think people have brought experience and passion and knowledge to it, and.
Well, I don't mean this. I just mean like when you try it. It takes. When I say this is why, there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions, right? Mm-hmm. And it just takes time to work through that. And one of the things that I would credit Tam for is being extremely patient and taking all of that into consideration and sort of shepherding things, because it's really easy to drop something. I've watched it happen with other ordinances. You get a little bit of pushback, or you get a lot of people who don't understand, and it's just like you got to have an advocate for it. You got to have somebody who cares. So I am standing to tell you I do support it, and I don't think we, I think yes, we can make it better, but I don't think we should abandon this.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Well, I want to thank everyone for the comments. I found it a very helpful discussion. Any questions from members of the Township Committee or comments at this point? My sense of it is we heard a lot of helpful things. We can then go back and take a look before the next meeting. Does anybody want to make comments, questions, anything?
I did have,
Yes,
so
please.
I'm all for grants, I love grants, and I'm all for passing something that helps us get grants. Could we just pass an ordinance, part of the ordinance saying like the East Stonewall Historic Preservation Committee adopts the standards of the Department of Interior? Would that just be simple enough to do that? Because they've got I'm on the website, so they've got like 10 guidelines.
Well, they got a lot of guidelines, depending on what kind of structures and things like that. that's a little too ambiguous. I mean, as I said, you can't put everything in the ordinance, but referring people just to, you know, essentially technical documents is not gonna be helpful.
No,
So,
I'm just looking at it from the grant perspective, like the easiest way to get us available for grants, since we're doing this big discussion, like if we pass an ordinance saying we adopt anything from Department of Interior, that won't,
I think that's too general, that won't, that, they wanna see that that this is an ordinance that reflects the town. And that wouldn't do that.
so I guess I'm confused why, but we have an historic preservation ordinance now, and but that's not
But
good
we
enough
don't
to
have
get
historic,
grants.
we don't have local historic districts.
We just have the national districts.
We just have the national districts, and, you know, the guidelines that we have in this ordinance, that's not everything that the interior, but these are the things that would be applicable to most applications that came before us. So, and they're very general.
Yeah, I guess I'd be, I mean, that, we don't do this now, that's what I'd like the follow-up discussion on, I'd like to know specifically what in this ordinance that was sent to us helps us get the grants. That's what I'm having the trouble with the disconnect with, so that's what, I'd like to see that.
Well, I don't know if
too.
we're gonna be able to point to a specific paragraph or sentence. It's the bare minimum of what we can have in an ordinance in order to make it worthwhile, which is what I got from the 3 people I talked to. And they don't just have opinions, remember, they have professional opinions. They've all been in the industry for a very long time. And I'll remind you, with respect to the planning board, when the planning board listens to experts, they have fact witnesses and they have expert witnesses. And the law requires them to consider that testimony differently. If you have somebody that gives you their opinion, a personal opinion, and I was an expert witness. Oftentimes my professional opinion and my personal opinion were 2 different things, because I have to justify my professional opinion, and I don't have to justify my personal opinion. So these people that I spoke with were giving me a professional opinion, which is what you would want. Now, you've got at least 2 planning firms, I think, that work for the town. They're both, I know both those firms are familiar with historic preservation. You want another professional opinion, you can ask them. But, you know, I don't think we should devalue, you know, what these people were saying as a personal opinion. It wasn't. These were professionals and well-accomplished
I don't think
professionals.
anyone's devaluing their opinion. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll speak for myself. I'm trying to understand it, right? I mean, it seems to me that it would be helpful to have local districts. I mean, that makes sense. It would be helpful to have a quorum requirement that makes it functional for the committee. I agree with Will's point that we should have information so that when people are thinking of knocking down or remodeling, they think about the importance of the character, as I now understand it, of that home. These things all make sense to me. Where it gets more difficult, I think, is when, you know, things pop up, when someone seeks a permit. If I'm understanding the proposal now, it's just that that's one juncture for us to provide information and services. But there's nothing inherent in that process. But if that's the case, I am a little unclear how a construction official would need to talk to the committee. So, for me, that's still a lingering issue. But so I think there's a lot that we can do. But
All right, well, let's talk about it. If that's the problem, I mean, that one line about having construction code officials and zoning officials look at it, that was actually introduced by the planning board. So that was not in
Because
an
I asked
original
how
draft.
this would work. Sorry.
Yeah, so if that's and we talked about the fact that the logistics of implementing that is going to have to be worked out. But you wouldn't work it out in the ordinance, you would work it out. You know,
sorry, what would have to get worked out?
the logistics of exercising that sentence, of making sure that the construction code official and the zoning official can interpret these guidelines, which are pretty.
But that's my question. Why do they need to interpret it at all if they're guidelines that are suggestions? And
Well,
what we really want to do is to provide information to people who are landowners so they can make a decision. So that's the gap for me.
No, this is the guidelines in the ordinance.
Mhm.
The way this reads, it would expect that the construction code official and the zoning official are gonna look at the plans, look at these guidelines that are listed here, design guidelines,
Mhm.
and be able to consider that, whether.
Why? Right, if it's voluntary, why would they consider it? That's what I'm not understanding.
Well, again, this is something that the planning board thought was important to include here,
Well,
because
ask
prior
Emily.
to that,
So,
it was only the planning board who was going to do this when applications come before. And then I think some people on the planning board thought, no, we want it, if anyone's coming for any sort of permit, we want these things to
but
be
why,
done.
why should the township just, I'll get back to my earlier point, so if what we really want is for landowners to consider the value of a structure that they have, so that they may want to take the opportunity to protect a piece of it or enhance it or change their plans, why not just do that, right? And this is why if you said a handbook has information about a Queen Anne's house, so they can turn to page 38 through 58 and see those things and have the HPC and other folks available to explain, answer their questions. And so to me, it just seems like a less onerous way of providing the information and suggestions that we want. Because otherwise, I know that construction official's not gonna wanna do this, and he's gonna say to me, what am I supposed to do when I talk to them? And I don't know what the answer is.
That's fine, but I don't think you're going to get that handbook unless you get a grant.
No, I get that, but that's Jenna's
And
question.
you're not
So-
gonna get the grant unless you have an ordinance, and this
Well,
ordinance is.
well, that says what, right? So I agree to Jenna, so to me, the big picture items so far are, we have to have our own local districts, right? So we have some ability to provide suggestions and the like. Two, you made the point strongly, and it makes sense to me, that we can get grant monies to provide this good information that are guidance only to our residents. So I like that, and I'm sure that's why Jenna was following up to say, what would we need to do in the ordinance to maximize that? Because I agree with both of you that works. So those are good. And then if we decouple it from the actual permitting processes, which are required by law, and so basically you shall not look at other considerations, I think it just makes it cleaner. So does that seem to be getting to the heart of what we want? Information, support, grant money, inventories. I think those are the main things, and that's why, Emily had a question.
So I just want to, I'm going back to some conversations that we had in planning board. My recollection, correct me if I'm wrong, is when you and I had this conversation, I said, I was literally asking the same question, like, how is this gonna happen? How is this gonna work? And the initial one was, well, if they're coming to the planning board and they're asking for variances, it's a really great time. It's a natural time, and by the way, that application is sitting on our desk. It's very easy for us to reach out to Historic Commission and say, listen, we have this on our app.
And the professionals are there.
Yeah, and our professionals are there. They're gonna see it, so they're already reviewing it. So that one to me was like pretty, I'm gonna say black and white. I may have muddied the water when I said, well, what if it's not coming in for variance? And my recollection is that we said we would put it in the ordinance as a way, we wanted them to get guidance, and we would figure out an exact process. When the application came in, if it was X amount of date, if it was X old, the building was X date, we would have a way to alert the HPC. We did not go through the details on that. If it's cleaner to say, let's start with just when it's a variance, and then go back and figure out how we're gonna handle the process with non-variances, that might be an option, because I understand exactly what you're saying. You're like, how do we do it when it's just, somebody wanting to fix the windows on their house without having to slow things down, but they're still coming in for a permit. And my experience is on how fast these move, there is an opportunity. Go ahead.
I was just thinking that you don't need a permit for windows.
Well, if you're expanding them, you are.
Right, but I mean, so maybe.
I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe if we have on our website, East Amwell values historically, and have a bunch of resources. I mean, because to me, it's mostly resources, right? So for education there, and then anytime someone makes an application, not that we're sending the construction official to talk to them and the HBC, but just say anytime someone felt like maybe the secretary for the planning board, anytime an application is received, we have a one-pager that says we value historic resources and we've got great resources on our website, or consult with HBC. I mean, so we can make it available, I think, in a way that's not heavy-handed. But, because I totally agree with protecting our historic
I
values
think we all
and
agree on
encourage.
that, it's just
Right.
how do we do it,
So it's
how do we
how,
balance it?
and that's why I think by decoupling it from, look, if you have a variance, you shall do this, I think instead, look, anytime, so the website thing is like anybody, anytime, you should just know, we've got these resources. And then if anybody makes an application for a land use something, a nice notice thing could be fine, and so I think this might also be why Jenna was saying, well, then what do we need the stuff in an ordinance for, right? Because if it's informational and helpful, we don't need to pass an ordinance to say we're gonna let folks know about our resources with HPC and our grants and other stuff. So thinking about what needs to be there, I think is where she was going. That's part of what I was thinking about.
I'm trying to think, I need to think about this a little bit, because there's sort of steps here, right? There's the creation, and I'm also going back to where did this come from, right? This came back, some of this came from, when we did the last master plan review, this was a recommendation, that is a recommendation that's been there for 10 years. You and I had a conversation, we made this a priority, right? So I don't wanna just water it down till it has nothing. It keeps coming up as a recommendation. There's a lot of towns who've figured out how to do this without doing it heavy-handed, right? So I wanna, before I sort of abandon it and say, oh, we're just gonna make it be.
Oh, no, to be clear, I wasn't saying everything. I was just saying for the things that are informational and resources, those things we should just do now anyway, right? Because it's good and helpful, right? And we should focus on.
If we have them available to us.
Well, and that's the point about the grants, right? So if in fact we need to have a particular ordinance to help us get grants, that's Jenna's question, right? We should obviously do that, and I'm totally in agreement. Should we have our own districts? I think we totally should. Should we have a workable quorum? I think we definitely should, right? So to me, there are core things that we can do. What else is there? Who appoints? Doesn't matter to me. Bridges and culverts, I think we should definitely make sure. I kind of like the idea of calling them out, separate ordinance or whatever. But to deal with that, and that's easy, and we can do it quickly.
What about asking the planning board to consider this when they're looking at variances?
To consider what?
To consider if it's a historic house, someone's coming in saying, I'm making this up, I'm trying to, I want to expand this, right? I want to expand this historic house, it's too big for the lot size. If part of the consideration there, one of the positives, if they're gonna do it consistent with the architecture and they're gonna work with the HPC, that would be a positive thing, right? So when you're looking at a variance, I think you're in a very different place than if you're looking at sort of business as usual permits. I'd like to at least have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about that with the planning board. I think that's a helpful thought.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Al, you had something to say.
Yeah. Is there a checkbox on any of our planning board, zoning board documentation stating that this is indeed a historic structure, property?
It asks if it's in a
In a
historic
historic
district,
That's it though,
But
right?
don't-
So
yeah, and we
if
don't
you own a
have
home
but
that's
we don't
historic.
have one,
Well, we've
and
got federal
also,
districts, so what's the purpose of the box if we
Yeah.
don't have districts?
Right.
Yeah, good question. Good question.
there's a lot of things on those
Do
checklists.
we know how, because you said Hopewell has a really good book
Yeah,
that we would like to
which is
have.
much more readable than the Department of Interior.
Do we know how they structure their ordinance?
Yes.
Can
but-
we copy, are we copying kind of what
Well,
they do?
Well, the
emailed it
the
to us.
Well, I think
ordinance,
we watered it down.
yes, we
And they're a commission
found,
in Hopewell.
we
Okay,
found
they're a commission.
ordinances that, well, we looked at towns that are similar to
Mhm.
this, and looked at their ordinances and put together a version of it
But
that,
do they pull in the planning, the planning board, is it just for a variance, or the construction office? Are
yeah,
they
I don't remember
included
the,
in
I
that,
don't
or
remember the
not that
details
kind
of the
needs?
Hopewell one. But I do know that they got a grant for their handbook, and they actually hired a professor from U of Penn to do it. And the handbook it's much more tailored to the township, and it's, like I said, much more readable and understandable than, again, you need to be a professional to read some of the
It's
standards.
150?
130, yeah.
Okay.
From,
We should still look at it.
from the
I'd like to see it.
Department of the Interior.
Are
Well,
these federal grants or state grants?
Any grants that we can get, my understanding is the county's coming out with a grant pretty soon.
Because I think Doge eliminated all the federal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Let's not.
Unless you drive there in a Tesla.
Let's
Yeah,
not.
and from my experience, when I lived in South Brunswick, you know, my wife and I owned a historic property there. Our house was built in like 1860, so went in front of them as a good citizen,
Yes.
as committee,
Yes.
on putting up a white picket fence out front. They're like, yeah, go for it. So we put up a white picket fence that was vinyl, and they lost their minds
Yeah, yeah.
because it was vinyl, and it's like, you know, vinyl versus wood, you know,
Right,
Tom
right,
Sawyer,
right.
Huckleberry Finn, did they, you know, the white picket fences back in the day? They did not like that. So when I went in front of the board, you know, there was a lot of pushback and, you know, a lot of resentment every time I went in front of them.
Right.
It was not pleasurable.
Right, right.
All right, so we have so many things on the agenda. Let me propose
Yeah.
this. I think that there are a number of things I know that I've heard that I think there's probably agreement of moving forward. There are also some things we want to get some more information about. We want to take a look at the Hopewell materials as well, the handbook. And I know Emily wants to talk with the planning board. So I think let's try to do that and see what we can put up for action at the next meeting. There's a lot, so look, I appreciate everyone's comments.
I would
Yep.
personally feel more comfortable with this if I had more information about the grant information, just
Yep.
speaking to this coming forward. And I think we could I checked with Frank, we could do a motion now to change the quorum. All right, like make it so it's over 50%, we could do that right, like the second if you want.
50
I
plus
mean,
one.
if we're all in agreement with that one, that's an easy, thing
Well,
to put
How
in
can
the
you
motion.
change the
in our
ordinance without a
ordinance?
first
Yeah.
reading?
We'd have to.
Yeah, an
we'd
ordinance.
have
Do that
to
by
move- That'd be an
ordinance.
Yeah.
amendment to the ordinance.
yeah,
Not a resolution.
Okay, I was
Sorry.
gonna say, that's okay.
I mean, it's a
Yeah,
good
if
thought,
we're
but
tinkering with it all, we have to
I mean,
do
I
that.
think there are things that we could put into, we'd try to move on next time, you know, introduce next
Okay.
time and do it, because it does require ordinances. And I think we can touch base with Tam and Will also, before the next meeting. I just think there's so many issues here, and we have had comments. Do you guys disagree? What's everyone's thought of this?
Completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, even if we have to do it in two parts, I think at least trying to move some of it forward,
Yeah.
would be helpful.
And I mean, for me, this was educational to go through this process, because it's not quite simple, even if the concepts are important, and I get that. Jenna, what's your thought? Do you think you're okay with that process?
Yeah, I am, I don't, yeah. I didn't know if we wanted to discuss anything, we wanna, like, you plan to do a first reading of some stuff next meeting?
Yeah.
Did we wanna discuss these category one things, what we wanna change, or you wanna, I mean, or you wanna look at that
Well, we gotta get
separately?
Mike around too, and, I mean, if you wanna discuss them, we can. For me, if you look at those, I think the quorum makes sense to me. Appointment of members doesn't matter either way. Cam said the same thing. Broad protection for historic bridges and culverts, yes, we should do that sometime. Time to document, I think we should document. I don't know what the right time is, I guess that's a discussion we can have. I think it's an important thing to try. I understand Rick's point about may not be doable anyway, and so I'm not sure exactly what to do with that, but I think, you know, and I'm not sure about an ordinance that says we
Yeah.
can ask somebody, but they've got the right to say no, but
Yeah, I guess we guess, yeah, sorry.
but it is important to try to document it for sure. So I mean, I think there are things that we can
Yeah.
easily have for introduction next time, and maybe there's more than that after we talk. Are there particular things that you can ask Tam or Will for to help with your analysis on grants? Is there anything before next time?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for. I mean, the three professionals that I spoke to said this is a minimum ordinance.
I mean, I know, you've said that a few times, but it's just, it's very general. Like, I don't understand what specifically is in that ordinance, so that's why if you wanna send me an email or call me and discuss it, that's my confusion for me. Like, I just am curious what's specifically in this ordinance that makes it easier to get grants. And if
Well, I
I'm
mean,
missing something,
it
you can
shows that the
explain to
town
me.
is committed because it has a process for designating landmarks. It has
And-
the
But we
guidelines.
have that already,
Don't we
right?
have, that's what I'm confused,
So-
because we have it already.
But I think, wasn't it that we don't have the local
But we don't have the
districts?
local
We
districts.
have to
and we
have
have
to
to
have
have
the
the
local
districts, yeah.
districts.
So that's what I
So-
understand.
And the guidelines.
So basically,
the
if-
architectural guidelines.
Okay, yeah, but that's a different thing, right? So I get the thing about having local districts, but if you're saying we also have to have the guidelines, that
That's-
seems to
yeah.
me not an easy thing just to do next time necessarily, because we've gotta figure it out. Maybe we can, maybe we can't, but that's,
Why do you, what's there to figure, we know that the guidelines in here are consistent with the Department of the Interior, what
Isn't
else?
it the process that's the issue, right?
yeah, like, for example,
Well,
just,
if it's the construction permit and zoning permit, just strike that line. I mean,
I don't know that it's just a strike a line, that's my point.
it
And
is,
that's
it's
why
one
when you.
line. It's one
Okay.
line.
So if in fact that's the only process thing that's causing an issue, then that's that, we could consider that. So, and it has to be clear that it's, the discretionary, like you said, so, I mean, there are issues for it, that's why I don't see there's anything we can decide now, because after an involved discussion like this, we have to go back and look at the actual language and think about this. And that's why these concepts, we probably talked about a dozen concepts or more, right? So I think the answer that I'm hearing, Jenna, is to be able to get grant money, ordinance needs to have local districts and have standards, even if they're completely discretionary. And so that's helpful to know.
It is.
So that's something to try to aim toward and
those
make
two
sure
things.
we don't screw up something else or make people afraid as part of that, or have a process that makes it onerous. And so it seems to me like that could be doable, but I think we have to look at it.
Emily, can we put that on the agenda for next week's meeting, or is that way too soon? I know the following week is gonna be
The
hot
following
and heavy.
week, no, we may have time,
Okay,
I mean,
Just
I don't.
something to consider.
We certainly could tee up a conversation, I think, thinking time-wise.
Mhm.
And what I would love to come in with is, we talked about these areas of concern where we have agreement and where we don't have agreement. From what I'm hearing, the biggest, we all agree, correct me if I'm wrong, we all agree that we're okay with the historic districts. We're okay with the guidelines, correct?
Well,
Correct?
may-
But we're not okay with
I wouldn't
trying
go
to
as far
make
as saying the
them-
guidelines.
We're not okay with, how we're gonna do it.
Election, is 1941 the right date?
Okay,
Some
got it.
folks have said,
What, do you
they,
want me
they
to-
suggest, no, what I'm saying is we can't debate the whole thing tonight because there's no way we can get to an agreement tonight. I'm answering Emily's question about how much is agreed to. I think the agreed to stuff is we should do local districts,
Mm-hmm.
we should have quorums, we should have ability to seek grants, we should. Bridge
We're
and
okay with the
culverts.
bridges and culverts.
Yeah, bridges and culverts protect, right? Those are the things, it gets harder when it's, what's the definition, is it all structures? How are we dealing with bridges and culverts? How is it getting triggered, right? I would rather not have it triggered and just have it informational, and if it comes to land use, give them the information and resources, but that's the thing we'll have to talk about. That's how I sort of see the discussion so far.
Yeah, so what I wrote down is that we agree on local districts, we agree on the quorum issue, we agree on seeking grants, we're okay with the bridges and culverts, where we really are, we need some work, right? Is sort of what defines historic,
Definition and process. probably,
definition,
yeah.
and what is the process? And I
Yeah.
feel like maybe that's where we spend some time
Yep.
at the planning board discussing
Yep.
it. I would ask two of you, anyone else who has specific comments on that, to think about bringing them forward in advance, specifically as it relates to definition and process. Where are other like townships, how are they doing it? Other likes, I know Tam's done a lot of that work.
Well, if you want to invite Tam to the next planning board meeting and maybe
She'll
she.
probably be there.
Yeah,
But
right.
Tam, you're invited.
Right, but she could bring,
I'm
for
joking.
example, I don't know, a copy of Hopewell's manual because she thinks that that's helpful and. Well, I know, but we need something to look at, right, to decide, is this helpful, right?
It is online.
Should we be doing this?
So online, we'll all look on that.
Yeah, and I actually feel pretty strongly that we should not get too detail hung up in these specific guidelines, and I'll tell you why for a minute. If they're only guidelines, I wanna let the experts and professionals cover that, right? But where I would like to really spend time is on the definitions and the triggers, and whether the guidelines, what they look like, right? In terms of actual.
Again, the definitions are consistent with the federal standards, with the federal recommendations.
Yeah,
So,
right,
I don't know what to
but-
tell you, but
Yeah.
the state follows the feds. I mean, it's consistent with the state if we do it this way. It's consistent with the county if we do it this way.
Consistency sometimes has advantages, I agree
The
with you.
one thing that we will not have on March 18th is we will not have our planner there, and if I would like to have him opine on some of this, then I would need to push that out a little bit. And
You
if-
can let
So-
us know what process it works.
Or maybe we can do category one, A and B, and then, you know, push everything off, you know, do this piecemeal.
yeah,
It might be much
Yeah.
simpler.
and I think it would be really, I'd like to, you know, even coming out of here with, here's what we agree on and here's what we need to work on is really helpful.
No, I think it's a helpful discussion, so I think that's how we should work on something between now and the next meeting to see what's actionable and collect whatever information. I think folks should talk amongst themselves and try to, you know, ferret that out so that your committee can have a discussion and then we can have a discussion and hopefully propose something. I mean, we'll need to, you know, propose something if it's gonna be introduced, so,
Yeah,
all right,
my eyes are itching, that's
all right.
allergies.
Well, thank you everyone for that. Yeah, make sure you hang around because we're gonna talk about Paul's idea for a grant. So, Jenna, did you wanna give an overview of this, or are you the wrong person, of what Paul's put together on grant, or from me or Al, or?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Paul informally, so I trust Paul if he wants to say what he needs to
Paul,
say about the
sure.
grant, yeah.
You want me to speak to it?
Yeah, please come up and present what your ideas are and.
Well, about 2.5 years ago,
Paul, can I stop you? He was just- Mike, thank you for a Sunday, by the way. I'm planning to speak on it later, but thank you very much.
no problem, that's what we do.
I know, but I was greatly appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for thanking me, appreciate it. Have a good night all.
Have a good night.
Sorry, Paul.
It's okay. Give me a break. So 2.5 years ago, when I joined the Historic Preservation Committee, I came up with this idea in order to use some of the resources that I knew existed under the guise of Elric Endersby, who's a partner in the New Jersey Barn Company. And as it turns out, around the year 2000, he took on a project with some other community members and members of the HPC to document farm structures, outbuildings, and related, anything, any kind of building or plot that was related to farms, agriculture. So my idea originally was to create a registry for the township, to have buildings like that on a list in which they were documented and measured, photographed possibly, and drawn. A lot of them were already drawn, and that's the list I was working off of, we were working off, because we formed a subcommittee to work on this, and then we subsequently would meet occasionally with Elric, and he conducted a few tours for us to give us basic information about the types of barns in the township, and that's where my learning curve began. And after a couple of years of trying to solicit participation with property owners about buildings, and also I then soon after engaged in this process of looking for a grant to finish the survey that as it began, now it's 25 years ago. On the survey from the past, there is about maybe 20 or so structures on it, and we want to now expand that with the help of Ehrlich, because he is basically an expert in the field. He and his partner have written books on agricultural and buildings and barns, and they have extensive experience and knowledge of all the kinds of structures, of which they have taken down a couple hundred of them over the last 40 years, and then re-erected most of them, and some of them stored, and some of them shipped away as far as New England, and you know, eastern Long Island. So they are very knowledgeable of the culture around historic structures and so on. So more recently, you know, I mean, I came to the conclusion that it was like too big of a job for us to handle as lay people, as, you know, learning as you go along and trying to engage the community, and it just was like too much of a job to handle without a real funding mechanism and the use of professional people, whether they be people that Ehrlich would interact with and know about, because he has extensive experience on serving on various historic preservation commissions and committees, going back to Princeton Township, Hopewell, and Hillsborough. So, and knowing the lay of the land, so to speak, knowing where these structures are and knowing the nature of the structures. And we have a real wealth of structures in this valley right here, from here at this point out to, you know, where I live, the edge of Hillsborough Township. And there are various types of, examples of 18th and 19th century buildings going all the way back to maybe even the 16th century. I mean, you know, yeah. And which, you know, immigrants came here and used different types of construction plans to put up buildings, whether they were Dutch or English or a blend of the both. And so someone asked recently, like at the meeting we were at the other day, why houses would be built into this. Because some of the houses that are now historic houses were originally barns. So, which brings me to the idea, the notion that we needed to really study and measure and expand this and produce a document which would be like a report that would contain drawings, photographs, bios, and in order to have a resource for people to know what is here to begin with. And this would kind of complement the discussion that we just had, or the project that we just have been discussing, because in order to preserve things, you have to know what they are, where they are, when they were built, and how they were built, and what they were used for. And this grant would actually overlay, it wouldn't be just simply about architecture and structures. It would also encompass the economics and to some degree the social relationships around the buildings as they were used at the time. So there's a lot of aspects to this grant, and we can take it in different directions. One would also be strictly like, not strictly, but an educational aspect, where we would conduct forums. We would hope to utilize the Clausen House Museum, in which at the end of the publication of the report, we would have like a photographic essay of what we studied and uncovered, and have a photography show on the subject. And then we would also have forums, like I said, and engage other experts in the area. This is a very special area as far as the subject is concerned. Some of the barns here are the best examples of what they are in the country, and some of them are the oldest. And it's just, I can't go into explaining why that's true, but when you walk into some of these places and they have beams the size of this podium here in girth and expending 30 feet or more, I mean, they're real impressive pieces of architecture that just for historic purposes have to be documented and made note of. And so that's why we're this is like the preservation of the knowledge of what went into them and how they were used, and as I said, some of the social aspects to it. So this grant that I looked into originally, of course, we didn't really follow through on applying because we didn't realize that we ran out of time and actually trying to meet the deadline of it. And now we're racing to meet this year's deadline, but the grant has changed somewhat, and this grant requires a contribution on a part of the township, and it also and it's a matching grant of 3-2, and it also requires the township to monitor and allocate the funds. So the funds would not come to the Historic Preservation Committee or Elric or me or anybody else. It would go to the township, and the township would then distribute it as the grant, the use of the grant went through.
Let me see if I could summarize, Paul. Tell me if we have this right. So you're proposing that the township would submit a grant application, I think the 24th of next month, and it would seek a total of $12,500, of which the Preserve New Jersey Historic Preservation Fund would fund 60%. East Amwell Township would fund 40%, which is $4,000. And there was a 2002 study done by the gentleman Ehrlich that you mentioned. You'll provide a copy of that for everybody to take a look at, the public and us. But that's what you want to update and expand as part of this grant.
Right.
And then and there's also a checklist, I guess, of items that you'd have to pull together for that deadline. So we have an opportunity at our next meeting to see those materials and consider this. So it sounds like it may be a good thing to pursue. I'd be curious from Will and Tam, what you guys think and whether this dovetails into what you were saying before. If we did this, would this mean that how would that affect the process you guys are talking about for inventorying and considering possible landmark designation? Is it different? Is it helpful in that process? And what are your opinions, either of you? Or both of you?
It would help in the process, and
Yep.
that is collecting an awful lot of information that could be used if any of those barns if we want
To
them
be
to have
part of
landmark
it.
designation.
Okay.
So it would help. The only question I would have is, with respect to the matching here, does it have to be dollar matching, or can it be in-kind match? So can the municipality provide some services, and we put a dollar amount to that, and would that count? I haven't seen the grant application, but sometimes grants will let you, volunteer to
Yeah.
do work.
Yeah.
And we put a dollar amount to that.
Do you happen to
That
know,
could be part of
Paul,
the
or is
No,
that
I don't
something?
know, and
Maybe
I don't,
she'll
no
share
mention
them.
of that was ever made.
Yeah,
And I
maybe you
think
could share those.
Elric would have.
If you wouldn't mind sharing those materials after the meeting, with Tam, so she could find the answer, because I think it's a good question. It might help you also in the preparation of your work on that. Was there anything else that you had, Tam? How about you, Will?
Well, I've just been introduced to the details tonight, as you are. And so the committee has not discussed this. So, and as I said, I think I copied you with the email,
Yes.
and that is, I'm in favor of any and all grants that we could accrue. That's wonderful.
Right.
And I certainly am in favor of the concept. We have not gone over the details, though.
Is your committee gonna meet before we have our next township committee meeting?
Yes.
And would it be something you guys would
The
take a look at?
first Wednesday of April.
Perfect. So if you guys are willing to take a look and then maybe you or someone could attend the next township committee meeting and, let us know if you think it's a good idea.
Like, well, that's, the timeline is like, I'm here tonight because, you know, at the next meeting would have to be, you would have to be willing to, participate in the grant. And, then the grant would have to be submitted April 24th, by April 24th. And I do have, with the help of Linda, some,
We
some
did
of these
circulate those.
checklists. Did you see?
Yeah,
The
so
answers
there,
on it?
we saw there are a lot of
Oh,
checklist
okay.
items, so our thought on timing was, you know, if, if the historic preservation folks think it's a good idea, right, that's why I wanted to find out when they're meeting. That would be helpful because we would prepare a draft resolution for potential adoption next time, but there still seems to be a lot, I wanna make sure they're on board, don't have suggestions. You gotta work on the checklist, we need to see that 2002 study so that people understand it, the public and us.
Okay.
But if those things work out, we could have it on the agenda for our 17th, so that you could have the
Alright.
next week after that to make your 24th deadline.
Very good.
Does that make sense? Okay,
Sure.
perfect.
That's all I'm hoping for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Perfect,
and
thank
and
you.
make sure to check with Tam too, because if part of this can be done in a way that helps the process she and Will are working on for the designation, let's, if there's any, I don't know if it would make a difference in this survey, but if there's a way that they can do it that is most beneficial, that would be great to know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
for
Paul.
your-
Good,
Thanks.
good find, Paul.
All right.
All right, so we'll have that on the agenda for next time, Linda, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, there is a sample resolution on
Mm-hmm.
the Historic Trust website that we would use if.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. All right, so other, thanks, Tam, for coming and presenting. So we'll skip the grit yard update. I was just, if Mike was here, we'd just reiterate, but basically we're reopening at the beginning of May. And the idea is we're gonna try out a pilot of accepting some brush from folks, and then we won't be able to grind it, so we'll then ship it. We'll see how that goes in terms of a process. We'll get some documentation on how many people are using it, how many residents, to see how important it is to residents. We will also have it staffed by DPW, so we've got our own cost expense there in addition to the carting. But we'll try that out in a way to try to save some services to residents, given the fact that we aren't able to grind anymore because of our the DP requirements.
I
So that-
think, just jumping on
Please
that,
go ahead,
Dante, I
yes.
think that we should look at people's driver's license, make sure they're residents of East Stanwell versus,
Yeah, that's a
you know,
good point.
who knows where.
Yeah, now that
Just
it's
dumping it.
staffed, we can do
Yeah,
that, and you're right,
absolutely.
that's a good point. Yeah, if you'll make
You
sure to
get a
let
true
Jason
number.
and Mike know,
Yeah.
that's a great point. Anything else on that from anybody? Maybe?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if we wanna get to the point of looking at driver's license, maybe ask them,
I'll be
you
there,
know,
I'll
like
be-
what
I'll
town you
card
live,
people.
like what road you live on or something, like.
Well, you have a problem with driver's license?
I live
Just
on
to show?
Ridge Road.
Well, what if somebody doesn't have the driver's license on them when they're
Then they
driving a
shouldn't be
vehicle?
driving.
Well, if they're
Well,
driving.
And then there's like going down a road, you know.
All right, let's not get bogged right now. I would, well, we can get, you guys have a discussion on that,
3 residents need to vouch for them if they don't have their driver's license.
yeah.
I think
Uh,
that's what
I'm joking,
Annandale
Jenna.
does though, I
And
think
I-
you have to
Yeah,
show
self-employed
the driver's
cars,
yeah,
license
other-
to
other
Lane
municipalities do.
County.
Yeah,
But-
6 points of ID.
that's right.
Exactly.
All
And your
right,
blood type.
Note to self, make sure Jenna brings license, just when she drives.
Hey Jenna, can we see your license?
Yeah, exactly.
Jenna's evil twin here.
All right, I'll try to keep this moving because it's already at 9:20. So state plan update, as folks know, the state's updating the state plan, state development and redevelopment plan. The state has designated each county as a negotiating entity in that process, so for us, Hunterdon is our negotiating entity. Hunterdon has asked the municipality, every municipality, to provide information via questionnaire at the end of the month, so I'm starting to work on that. That'll basically tell them some general things about our ordinances in this regard. But in addition, we had asked the state to include a designation of the Saralins region as an area of statewide concern or a special resource area. They did not include it in the draft that they circulated to everybody. So we have followed up, as folks know, last month we passed a resolution specifically asking for that designation. When we have, we do our questionnaire, we'll remind them again, and we will ask the county to make that important. In addition, folks should know that the Saraland Conservancy, that is obviously invested in protecting the Saralands, has a petition online on their website. So if any residents want to go to saraland.org, as I have, go there and you can add your name to the petition. Again, encouraging the state to be protective. I'm going to be reaching out to Hunterdon County to ask them to adopt a resolution akin to the one that we adopted last month. I don't know if anyone else has updates on that, but it's very important to protect the Saralands region as part of keeping it rural, protecting our resources. So we're going to continue to push for that. Just 2 notes here on grant applications that we had been seeking, things that are important to the Township Committee because it's important to residents. One, we were trying to get a grant for a generator for this building because we have O&M functions here. We want to be able to have power if there's an issue also during election. Unfortunately, FEMA told us we were not eligible. Best I can understand it is because we're not in a flood zone, and we don't actually have people staying over during emergencies unless overcapacity at the county. So that was unfortunate, but we'll continue to seek, it's something for backup power. I mean, if we can get solar, that'd be even better, but we tried that, it's not a go. We also tried to get money for flood mitigation. In particular, I was pursuing money to clear out Backbrook and some of our streams that are backed up with trees, debris over the years, and those are areas that flooded during Ida, because when you have debris in the stream, it causes problems for our residents. Unfortunately, FEMA also said that no funds were available for that. The apparent explanation is that that's maintenance, not flood mitigation. So, I don't know how they expect small little towns trying to protect their residents to do this, but unfortunately, those efforts, we're not able to find a positive resolution. We will continue to see if there's something that we can do for that. I've asked our DPW superintendent to try to get some proposals from folks with, large track machines to see what it might cost to have them do that. Maybe you can try to go to the state to get some assistance with grant monies, but fortunately FEMA did not help us with that either. Jen, I think you wanted to make a comment on fire company and rescue squad for a recent event.
Yeah, as many of you know, there was a fire in East Amwell on Sunday, and it happened to be on Ridge Road, which was, and Andrea was here. It was actually right next door to my house.
Oh, wow.
And it was, we were very lucky. Nothing happened. It did impact our neighbors behind us. They had some damage. They had a lot of damage, not to their house, but to their outside area. Took out their generator and stuff. But that fire spread quick. It was big. I think it took out like 5 acres, but I just wanted to thank our local fire company and our rescue squad. I mean, they were there. It didn't feel fast in the moment, but they were there very fast. They got it completely under control. We were concerned because it's very dry. There's concern, is all the fire going to be out and stuff, but I mean, they were there. They saw where it was. They went right up to Lindbergh Road to put it out over there. The rescue squad was there supporting them as well, so.
Was that the night they had their banquet?
No, it was afterwards, yeah. I know there was a fire, I forgot this fire at Stony Brook, the night of their banquet dinner. But it was very scary, and very much appreciate the town coming in and helping and putting it out and doing everything. So I just wanted to thank the rescue squad and also the fire squad, and Mike G was there directing traffic and everything, and doing other things. That's why I thanked him.
Yeah.
And then I also, I said I would speak for Mike about,
Tree.
yeah. I guess for about a year, we've had some local residents trying to deal with, there was also on Ridge Road, a tree kind of leaning over in the way. And I just want to say that I went home today and the tree has been taken down. I think Mike did all the work reaching out to JCP&L.
She emailed both of us.
Yeah,
To
so,
tell us that they took it down.
yeah, I mean, it was a big tree and it was like way over the road, so,
Trying to talk. Are you trying to say something, Mike?
No, I'm listening. I'm listening. Thank you for covering
Okay,
that.
so,
It's-
as usual,
it's
Mike
down,
just,
That's what I know.
okay. Mike just sends an email and stuff seems to get done, so I just wanted to, thank Mike for doing that and thank for the residents that had reached out about it, but it was definitely an issue because it was gonna take out all the power lines on the road, so we got that fixed, so that was a good one.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I really appreciate how all the township committee members are so responsive to residents. I mean, a resident reached out, sent me a message, an email. I let Mike know, and next thing I know, JCP&L had cut the tree down. It was the fastest thing I've ever seen, so I appreciate that. And, being responsive to residents is important, so good job. So the final issue I have on, item I have for discussion is Revolution, New Jersey. Al?
Yeah, sure. I went out, I think it was March 1st, to the Hunterdon County Library and represented East Amwell. Francis was there, John Allen was there, so I think somebody else was there from East Amwell, but the ball's starting to roll. We might get a Liberty pole, which is a large pole with a red flag on top, and I guess that was used to muster the troops back in the day. So I'd like to see if we can get that going at Clawson Park. Francis also mentioned something about having like a little encampment at Clawson Park. I mean, we have some time, but, I'm all in on this. Reached out to HPC. I've had a couple other emails, so the ball's rolling. I'm not dropping anything on this one. I mean, it's 250 years for America.
Yeah,
And,
And there was talk of a parade.
Yes.
Would be a location or a place for it.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
either of you two could be George Washington and I'll provide his
Oh, I-
white horse.
I'll
Sure,
get fitted with
I
wooden
can ride.
teeth.
Yeah. You never know.
I don't know if I could unsee that.
Me with hair, that's scary. But I think
the
this is a
pants.
wonderful thing for, our county,
Yeah,
our
agreed.
township, and,
That's an
country.
exciting
So
thing to
It's
celebrate.
very exciting.
Yep, good work.
Thank you.
Okay, so those are our special discussion items.
Did we skip the budget?
Skip what?
Yes.
Budget.
Budget?
Yeah, you have that under special discussions.
Oh, thank you for, by way of update. This is just, thank you, Linda. So this is just a quick notice of where we are. So as you know, we're starting to prepare a budget. We think that by next meeting, we'll have a budget to introduce and release to the public, so everybody can take a look, have an initial discussion, and then obviously the meeting after that is the one where we would consider adopting it. So just for folks who are playing at home and following along, you'll have materials with our next township committee meeting released through that. Anything else I missed on?
Nope.
Good, all right, excellent. Item 9 on the agenda, standing committees. So today we have proposed the appointment of Rosemary Georgette, Recycling Committee, 3-year term to expire December 31st, 2027. Potential appointment of Kendall Larson and Dave Harding, Historic Preservation Committee, Class B to Class A. Appointment of Lance Lothan, Planning Board, would be alternate number 3 is our final slot. A 1-year term expiring December 31st, 2025. May I have a motion to confirm these appointments?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
So we're unanimous on that. So the next 2 items, item 10 and 11, 2 ordinances, we're carrying till April. Unfortunately, with the advent of newspapers not carrying legal ads the same way they used to, we have to renotice these. So these will be noticed for second reading, both of these for our April meeting. Item 12, consent agenda. So the one I was gonna call in particular, Al, was just the one that you had been shepherding, 2025-65, a resolution to approve a grant application for the shade canopy.
Right,
Because you've been
yeah.
working hard on
Yeah,
that.
yeah, the county fired back an email to me saying they wanted a resolution, saying we're going forward with this, so, that was a couple weeks ago. I sent it to Linda, who typed it up, and, Dante will sign it, and as soon as I get it tomorrow morning, I'll send it right back to the county. Make sure that grant is moving forward, fingers crossed.
And the rest of those are self-explanatory. So may I have a motion to approve resolutions 2025-62 through 68 as filed with the Office of the Township Clerk?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you, Mike. You hear you too?
Ms. Casper Bloom,
Yes.
Ms. Enton,
Yes.
Mr. Nardi,
Yes.
Mr. Dendis,
Yes.
Mayor DePiero.
Yes. Okay, new business. Anybody have anything we haven't mentioned so far? All right. Approval of bills. May I have a motion to approve the March 13, 2025 bills of the evening?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
What? Unanimously passed. 16, approval of administrative reports. May I have a motion to approve the administrative reports?
So moved?
Second?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Good job, Mike. All right, so unless I'm missing something, Linda, we're open to the public?
Yep.
Okay, this time open to the public on any matter. Yes, please.
Just a quick blurb about the grit yard. I only recently got to know that that was closed. It was always open, to my knowledge. But I went away, came back. Where I used to live, my old neighbor, she's old. I do landscaping for her, and she's like, "Oh, can you take all those branches to the grit yard?" Nope. So just that matter of somebody needs to show proof. Well, I live in Flemington, so if you look at my license and see I'm from Raritan Township, are you gonna let me bring those branches? Because she's not driving her branches there, I'm driving her branches there, so how's that going to operate?
I don't.
Good question.
That's
We'll
something
have to think
about.
about that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I get it. Well, we'll have to figure out a way to deal with, tag the brush with the right address. We'll figure out something. Francis, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. I don't have time, I got a dumpster.
Wow. I mean, orange SUV, a few
Use
trips.
that note in front of the whole file.
Over time, sorry, I'd move faster. I met with my insurance guy this week, trying to lower my bill, it's now gonna go up, surprise, surprise. But one of the things that's timely with the fire on Ridge Road is the fires that happened in Hopewell Township and the amount of dead ash trees and debris that is all over the mountain. We are a fire hazard waiting to happen that could take out, another drought, and we could have all sorts of problems. So if there's some way to put on your thinking caps or to see with the state or someone to where there could be a mechanism to get some of this burnable debris at least out of the way, or some kind of a plan, a grant or something, that's something to put on your lap, because otherwise we're all gonna have insurance claims coming up the yin and the yang. Fortunately, I removed the dead trees or the dying trees at my place, and I'm not on the mountain, but I'd be terrified to be living up there the way you do, because of, it can go in a second. And even down in Asheville where I have my house, they're having fires there too. So this is the climate change that we aren't having, that we're having, and that everybody's denying. Guess what? It's coming, and it may be burning to a house near you. As far as the grit yard and the chopping up stuff, you might want to have a conversation with Brian Giles, because the tree service guys, they get a lot of lumber, they get a lot of debris, they do a lot of chipping. What do they do with it? What kind of quid pro quo, or not so much that, as a way of thinking outside the box to manage some of this stuff could be done for, to help people who wanted just a place to put their leaves or to put their whatevers, and without it costing $400,000, because the state of New Jersey put in some laws without unfunding them. And how badly are we getting hit or not hit in terms of state money? Is that kicking you in the budget that you're trying to deal around? I know Flemington, Raritan school districts, they got nailed for that What about any kind of aid to East Amwell for education, but also for our tax dollars? Because I know they're going to have to go over the budget cap for the school and things like that. Now, they might be able to pull it out of the money that they've been saving and banking for a while, so that there won't be a hit. But I think the next 2-3 years in Washington are gonna be crazy town, and then some, so, you know, just something to do. And as far as having to deal with, how are you gonna deal with a construction official? If you pick a date, 1940, you can do a sort on your properties, sorted by block and lot and by date, and they can give you a list that a construction official can go to a report and say, okay, here's an address, or here's a block and a lot, and it's 1940 or before, yeah, it is, and here, go talk to these people or not as you wish, but an easy way to keep the construction official from screwing up. Because remember, our historic district up there at the top of Linvale Road, the person who owns that, he just went and demolished a whole bunch of stuff and redid it, and while it might look nice, the person who issued the permits 2, 3, 4 years ago let him do it, and that one building that's there is close to the stream that comes off from Amwell Lake and to whatever, and that never should have been allowed. So how are we going to prevent people from doing what they want and asking for forgiveness and getting away with it? You know, you just idiot-proof the process. And I worked in the government long enough to know how to deal with it. Thank you, that's it. Let's all
Thank
go
you,
home.
Francis.
All right, anything else? Seeing nothing, all right, without objection, we're closed to the public. Let me just say on the fire hazard, everybody just remember, we do have hazardous fire conditions, in the township. My understanding is that, one stray cigarette may have caused that blaze on, Ridge Road, and, many houses, a number of houses were imperiled, and that could happen anywhere. We have lots of trees, which is wonderful, but, you have to be careful because of the dry brush, so everyone please use extra caution. Any other comments from anybody, issues?
Nope.
Okay, seeing no other business, I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's the idiots that does
Yeah.
Unanimous. Okay, thanks everyone.
Yep.
Thanks for the long meeting.
Good night. So, we signed off. I was gonna be like, it's so much better without Mike here. But he was off before he could hear me.
I'm not telling him you said that.